After a tiring day at work, I returned home to discover my wife was not there. I called out her name as I climbed the stairs and announced my return. She responded, saying she would be down shortly, using our familiar playful nickname exchange. We had developed this habit since we first met at a costume party where I had dressed up as Tarzan. During our initial encounter, I accidentally nearly bumped into her. Upon apologizing, she jokingly pointed out my Tarzan costume and then gestured to her own attire, indicating she was Jane. We shared a laugh, and from that moment on, we became known as Tarzan and Jane. We'd been happily married, or so it seemed, for what felt like 5 years. I cracked open a beer, settled onto the couch, and flicked on the 6 Square news. As Jane descended the stairs, my eyes widened in disbelief. She wore my favorite little black dress, reaching mid-thigh, with a daring neckline that, while not extravagant, certainly wasn't modest. I knew it was backless, meaning she skipped the bra, yet her movements gave it away. Adorning her neck was the anniversary necklace I'd given her just a month prior. I reached for my phone to capture the moment, though uncertain why. Wow, I didn't realize we had plans. Let me freshen up and change. By the way, where are we going? Nowhere. Robert Cohen invited me to dinner and dancing tonight. I'll likely be late, so don't wait up. Bob Cohen? The notorious womanizer who got banned from all company parties? He's not like that. It was just a misunderstanding with a paranoid husband that caused the issue. Well, there's a paranoid husband here too, and he says you're not going out with him. I'm not your possession, she retorted, making her way to the door. Maybe not, but when we exchanged vows, we committed to each other. It means something to me. I thought it meant something to you too. Don't be so old-fashioned. It's the 21st century. Nobody buys into that anymore. Really? I wish you'd mentioned that sooner so we could divorce and date whomever we please. Divorce? She laughed incredulously, heading out. Following her, I grabbed a familiar item from the closet as Alexis pulled into the driveway. Here's Robert. Order yourself dinner. She left. Jane, I called, and as she turned, I ripped off her dress, leaving her in just a tight black thong and heels. She hesitated, then dashed back inside. I headed for the Lexus, gripping the Louisville Slugger in my hand. Cohen hastily retreated, leaving tire marks. Nodding to neighbors enjoying the spectacle, I returned indoors, stowing away the bat. I grabbed another beer as the first had warmed and settled in, awaiting the inevitable confrontation. I didn't wait long before Jane stormed downstairs, wrapped in a bathrobe, her anger palpable. Her words flowed in an endless tirade, reminiscent of Paul Simon's lyrics. Some of the phrases were ones I'd never encountered even in the Bible. I simply sat there until she cooled off. What were you thinking? What was your plan? I queried. I don't know. Our lives have become so monotonous, lacking the joy we once had. How come I'm only learning about this now? And the times I suggested something different, you were always too busy, uninterested, or disgusted. Even if you could somehow justify infidelity, why embarrass me by attempting to publicly humiliate me? Because I didn't want to cheat. I thought if I told you, it wouldn't be cheating, I explained. That's the most absurd thing I've ever heard. Being in bed with someone else without my consent is unquestionably cheating. Maybe you'd allow me, she said, looking hopeful. You're out of your mind. I need to leave before I say or do something we'll both regret, I declared, grabbing the keys and darting out before she could rise from her chair. I did what any other manly man would do. I sought refuge in my favorite bar to drown my sorrows. What's wrong, John? Sam asked, sliding another bottle toward me. You seem like you've lost your closest companion. Perhaps you're not too far off, Sam. When I got home tonight, Jane was dolled up and informed me that she'd be returning late from work with some guy and that I shouldn't wait for her. You obviously declined, Sam presumed. Of course I did. What kind of idiot do you think I am? I was about to wipe the grin off his face when he said, I'm just pulling your leg, man. So, what happened next? She began spewing the usual nonsense about not belonging to me. That loyalty is outdated. I guess you didn't buy into it. You got that right. I understood it loud and clear. Right then, this guy pulled into the driveway, and Jane headed for the door. What are you saying? What did you do? I fetched a persuasion tool from the closet, followed her, and ripped off her dress right there on the street. She froze momentarily, then realized the neighbors could see her in her thong and rushed back indoors. I went to the car with my Louisville Slugger, and the guy bolted. Looks like a win for you. So why are you here at my humble establishment? The victory was short-lived. I was enjoying a beer when she descended, sulking like a bear. After she calmed down, she resumed her nonsense. Our bed life was routine. It wouldn't be cheating if she didn't do it behind my back, if I consented. Sam was left speechless. That's when I knew I had to leave. And here I am. Sam opened a couple more cold bottles. We toasted and drank. I had one more before deciding it was best to stop before risking any mishaps. Good night and good luck, John. Thanks, Sam. I think I'm going to need it. Upon arriving home, I found Jane already in bed. After completing my evening routines, I slipped on my pajama bottoms and settled into bed with my back to her. Drifting off to sleep, I thought I heard her quiet sobs, but I brushed them aside. Downstairs the next morning, Jane was already busy preparing breakfast. The meal was silent until we finished cleaning up, and Jane broached the topic again. John, why can't you understand that times have changed? No one expects to commit their entire life to just one person. Well, I don't feel alone. And about spending our lives with one person, neither of us were inexperienced. We dated others, I countered. You know that's not what I'm getting at. We were young then, barely knowing where life would take us. Now, we've had more life experiences, more chances for comparison, Jane argued. I don't need to compare anything. I compared plenty before proposing to you. I chose you because I knew you were the one I wanted to spend my life with. When you said yes, you confirmed you felt the same, I reminded her. Were you being truthful? Yes, but what about you? Have you changed your mind? If so, maybe we should consider divorce, I suggested. I don't want a divorce, Jane admitted. Well, you can't have it both ways. If you don't want a divorce, then you need to let go of this idea, I asserted. Looking down, she murmured, I don't want a divorce. So it's settled, I stated, though uncertainty lingered. Despite Jane's claim of abandoning the notion of another man, I couldn't shake my suspicions. Every time she returned home later than expected, especially without calling, I fretted she might be pursuing an affair. I began monitoring her discreetly. No private investigator, bugs, or GPS trackers. Just casual visits for lunch and unexpected phone calls. Tension brewed between us, affecting our closeness, which became less spontaneous and more cautious, lacking passion. And then it happened. Eventually, I lost my patience. Jane, I want a divorce, I declared. She was stunned. But I thought we were okay, she protested. Really? Do you honestly believe everything is fine between us? That we're anywhere close to where we used to be when everything was truly fine? I challenged, and she shook her head in response. Telling my parents was tough. They couldn't comprehend why we couldn't salvage our marriage. When my father-in-law confronted me, I showed him a compromising photo of Jane, and he recoiled. We faced scrutiny from the family, and I allowed guilt to consume me to spare Jane embarrassment. But ultimately, I had to reveal the truth to everyone and expose her intentions. Confronted by her family's disappointment, Jane sought solace from me. John, is there anything I can do to change your mind about the divorce? She pleaded. I pondered and came up with a condition she'd likely never agree to. Okay, Jane. I won't halt the divorce, but I'll postpone it on one condition, I proposed. Her demeanor brightened. Anything, John. Anything. Be cautious when you say that. Anything encompasses a lot, I warned. I'm not concerned, she replied confidently. I'm sure you won't go overboard. What's the condition? She inquired. I'll permit you to date other men as long as I can date other women, I stated. I could have sworn I saw a smirk before she masked it with a sugary smile. Of course, John. That sounds fair. That settles it. I bet she didn't anticipate I could find another woman. But there's more, I interjected. What? You can't start dating until I've secured a date myself, I stipulated. She seemed perturbed. I knew she had a guy in mind, and she must have been anxious about what would happen if I couldn't find anyone. I decided to throw her a lifeline. If I can't find a date within 2 weeks, then you can go ahead with your plans, I added. It brought out one of the brightest smiles I'd seen from her in weeks. She wrapped her arms around my neck and kissed me. That's fantastic, John. Thank you. You'll see. This will be just what we need to breathe life back into our marriage. Yes, it'll either revive it or flush it down the drain. A few days later, she was taken aback when I informed her that I had a date and suggested arranging a double date for the following Friday. She probably thought I was bluffing, assuming she'd have a date while I sat at home alone. Little did she know, I had arranged a date that I hoped would put an end to this madness once and for all. On Monday, I took an extended lunch break to shop for new clothes and left them in the car. I left work early on Friday to get my hair done and return home before Jane. Sneaking into the guest room with my new attire, I was in the shower when I heard the garage door open. After shaving and brushing my teeth, I headed to the bedroom to finish getting ready. I think I caught her off guard when I emerged from the guest room in my new outfit and with a fresh hairstyle. But she quickly composed herself. I informed her that Robert would pick me up at 6:30 and that everything was arranged. We had reserved a table at Amelia's for 7 under my name in case she arrived before us. Then I walked out the door. What Jane didn't know was that we had a new colleague at work, Candide DeSantis. Candide was a stunning redhead who turned heads of every red-blooded American man as she passed by. Despite being completely professional, she piqued curiosity among office gossips. We struck up a casual friendship, and when she occasionally flirted with me, I politely displayed my wedding ring. Naturally, she was intrigued when I invited her for a drink after work. I arrived at the bar before her, lost in thought as she entered. "So, John, what happened to pull the last American Boy Scout out of his shell?" she teased with a laugh. A glimpse of my despondent eyes wiped the smirk off her face. "Oh, John, I'm so sorry," she said, placing a comforting hand on mine. "I didn't mean to tease you, but you're usually so straightforward. You look like you've lost your best friend." Tears welled up in my eyes, and I turned away. She draped her arm around my shoulders and led me to a table, and I ordered a drink. Patiently, she waited as I gathered my composure and recounted my woes. "Well," she said, "there's only one thing to do." "We?" I questioned, surprised. "Yes, we. I'll be your date." For the first time since Jane concocted this crazy plan, I laughed. "Why are you laughing? I'm serious," she insisted. I stared into her eyes, half expecting a prank that never came, and realized she meant it sincerely. "Why? Why me? I know you don't mess with married men. Damn it. You hardly mess with single men either. If they thought they had half a chance, all the straight people and half the gay people in the office would be lining up to date you," I exclaimed. "I'm not merely seeking a date. As you mentioned, I can date any guy I want. I'm fond of you. Perhaps it's because you don't always eye me up," she confessed. "Yes," I acknowledged. "Not always. I understand there are moments when you do. You'd have to be oblivious to never do so. But you consistently treat me with respect when we interact. You value my ideas, supporting me when others dismiss them because they originate from me. Furthermore, I genuinely like you, and I'm upset about how disrespectfully your wife treats you. So, are we going on a date or not? I may have been born at night, but not last night. You're in, right?" she pressed. I finished my drink and escorted Candide to her car. She shared her number, gave me a friendly hug, and departed. Arriving at Candide's house, I anticipated that my life was about to take an intriguing turn. I barely had a chance to step out and open the car door before she reached it. Standing a bit taller than Jane, but still shorter than me, unlike Jane's infamous LVD on her regrettable date, Candide donned a knee-length dress with a slit on the left side, almost reaching the hip. The emerald green hue complemented her wavy, vibrant red hair cascading to her waist. Sporting more cleavage than I'd ever seen Jane flaunt, Candide nearly stumbled as I assisted her into the car. Taking the driver's seat, I was greeted by a creamy white thigh before she adjusted her dress, flashing me a wide grin. She teased that we would have plenty of time for that later, calling me cowboy. I had to compose myself before driving off, feeling a bit uneasy from her hearty laughter. As if I wasn't already feeling bashful enough, she began stroking my thigh, reigniting my arousal. Thankfully, we arrived at the restaurant before things escalated too far, and I regained my composure. Upon entering the restaurant, Jane and Robert were already seated. While I had encountered Robert several times before, his presence that evening left no greater impression on me than prior encounters. Jane, however, was visibly taken aback, her temper flaring hotter than I'd ever witnessed. Since Robert remained seated, I refrained from extending my hand, merely nodding at Jane before assisting Candide to her seat. Jane appeared astonished that I had orchestrated such a splendid date. I sensed she was about to make a snide comment, but thought better of it. Meanwhile, Robert couldn't tear his gaze away from Candide's cleavage, prompting Jane to nudge him sharply in the ribs to redirect his attention. Though I anticipated an awkward dinner, after a hesitant start, to an outside observer, we appeared like any other two couples, oblivious to the fact that we were husband and wife dining with different partners. After dinner, we headed to the club for drinks and dancing. Fast-paced songs posed no issue, but during the slow dances, when Candide nestled close, Jane's glare could have pierced steel. Jane began to grind against Robert, as if intent on making love right there on the dance floor. While her behavior typically would have embarrassed her, she seemed lost in her own world. When Robert's hand ventured under her dress, stroking her chest, I felt embarrassed on her behalf and escorted Candide back to our table. We watched Jane and Robert's spectacle unfold until the manager intervened, patting them on the shoulder. Though I couldn't hear their conversation, they were evidently asked to leave. Jane rushed back to the table in tears, grabbed her coat, and swiftly exited the club with Robert close behind. "Well, you certainly know how to show a girl a good time," Candide giggled. All I could do was laugh, and we returned to the dance floor. When we were ready to leave, I approached the manager. "I apologize for our companion's behavior," I stated. "Don't worry about it. No complaints here, sir," the manager replied. "It was my wife, or soon-to-be ex-wife, who seemed a bit jealous of my date," I explained. The manager appeared slightly puzzled, then glanced at Candide. "I see, sir," he said with a smile. "Feel free to visit any time," he added. Resuming his duties, I escorted Candide to her apartment and walked her to the door. As I leaned down for a friendly goodnight kiss, she surprised me by pulling me closer for a passionate kiss. "Would you like to come in for a nightcap, or something else?" she inquired. For some reason, it seemed she had more than just a drink in mind. But who was I to object? The notion of a nightcap was quickly forgotten once the door closed behind us. As she pushed me onto the couch and straddled my lap, the slit in her dress widened, offering a teasing glimpse of lace underwear. She unbuttoned her dress, letting it fall to her waist, revealing firm chest and pert mamilla. Without hesitation, I kissed one while fondling the other. My arousal heightened, evident from her movements atop my lap. Eventually, she knelt before me, unbuttoning my trousers. When my member emerged, she tantalizingly licked its underside and tip before taking it into her mouth. Her movements were deliberate, slow, leaving me unsure of how long I could hold out. Gradually picking up pace, she brought us both to the height of passion. Thankfully, having already climaxed once, I managed to hold on until Candide reached another peak of pleasure. Before ejaculating, I shifted next to her, and she nestled beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. Lying there, I had a nervous thought. Candide? In my excitement, I forgot about protection. It's okay. I'm on birth control pills." Luckily, she soon climaxed, easing the tension. I breathed deeply. I couldn't say how long we made love, but it felt like mere moments before we reached mutual climax. Drifting into sleep, I pondered where Jane got the notion that our bed life was dull. But if my time with Candide was any indication, it wasn't because of me. I stayed the night at Candide's, waking to her gentle touch on my body. We showered separately, and while she finished, I made breakfast. "Wow," she said, "a great lover and a cook." "I aim to please," I joked as we sat down. "I really like you. Last night was the best I've ever had, but I need to address issues in my marriage. And even if we divorce, I'm unsure when I'll be ready for another relationship. Don't worry, John. I was just teasing. I like you too. And if things work out, I can see us in a relationship. But you're right. You need to sort things out with your wife first." We finished eating, chatting about nothing, until I decided to go home and assess our marriage. I walked in to find Jane at the kitchen table, holding a coffee cup, her eyes red-rimmed. "So, how was your night with Robert?" "Oh, John, it was awful. All I could think about was you and Candide. She's so attractive and beautiful. I know I'll never measure up." "If you hadn't started this, you wouldn't have to worry about competition," I pointed out. Unable to meet my gaze, she nodded in agreement. "You probably wouldn't feel so sorry if it were just you and Robert, and I was left alone at home." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded again. "I just don't know what to do. Part of me wants to leave you and start fresh. I see the woman I married, not an evil person, but someone confused. And I hope there's a way back for us," I said, hope shining through her tears. "I'm going to change and go out for a bit. While I'm gone, you should move to the guest room. We'll talk more later." "Please don't make me move, John. How can we reconcile if we're apart? I need you now more than ever. You don't understand what's happening. It's not certain we'll be together again." "Maybe you should have thought about how much you needed me before this," I said, before heading upstairs. Jane was sitting at the table when I went downstairs and headed for the door. "John," she said, and I turned around. I love you. I simply nodded and departed from the house. I realized it might seem aloof, but I needed her to grasp the fragility of our marriage. Down by the Charles River, I strolled along the shoreline, observing rowers in their boats and sailboats gliding on the water. Seated on a bench, I encountered several families with young children, which saddened me as I pondered if I'd ever have kids with Jane. I don't know how long I lingered there, but as the sun set, a chill set in. Drawing a deep breath, I rose and trudged back home. Jane remained seated where I left her, looking at me with hope, but I simply shook my head sadly, retreated to my room and locked the door. Fully clothed, I lay on the bed, covering my eyes with my hand. I couldn't say how long I remained there before hearing a soft knock on the door and a whisper. "John." I remained silent, and after a second attempt, I heard her footsteps receding to the guest room. After ensuring she retired for the night, I took a quick shower and fell into a fitful sleep. When I descended the next morning, Jane had prepared a hearty breakfast. Surprisingly, I had a good appetite, while Jane merely picked at her food. "John," she said, "do you think we should consider seeing a marriage counselor?" I contemplated the idea. I wasn't well versed in counseling. Would they try to persuade me to accept Jane's actions? If so, I could simply walk away. Did I want to salvage everything? One thing I gleaned from my time with Candide was that our bed life had grown mundane. Is that something I truly desire? I still harbored anger that Jane never communicated her grievances. I resolved that my love for Jane was worth fighting for, at least for now. "All right, Jane, let's give counseling a shot." She nearly leaped from her seat. "Let's be clear," I asserted. "I won't tolerate a counselor pushing to salvage our marriage. It may or may not be salvageable. I won't entertain any ulterior motives." Her disappointment was palpable. She likely hoped for a sympathetic counselor who aligned with her modern beliefs. Nevertheless, she reluctantly agreed. The counseling sessions proved surprisingly fruitful. Jane came to realize how her reluctance to collaborate contributed to her dissatisfaction with our bed life, and I recognized the need to be more assertive. We delved into our desires, expectations, and needs regarding our bed life. While the counseling helped address many issues, I couldn't shake the betrayal I felt, even if I didn't allow it to fully consume me. Despite my attempts to reassure Jane regarding Candide, her insecurities persisted. I explained that while I had some feelings for Candide, I wasn't in love with her, and our date was merely a rebound. However, she struggled to accept this. Ultimately, we decided on an amicable divorce. Once the divorce was finalized, I took stock of my life. No, I didn't reach out to Candide immediately. Instead, I reserved a room at a coastal bed and breakfast in Maine. It was off-season, fitting my somber mood. I simply wanted to unwind and reflect, figuring out my next steps. When I returned, I phoned Candide. We dined together, and I allowed her to tuck me in, though it was more for solace than desire. The following morning, as we lounged in bed, I idly toyed with her nipple. "Penny, for your thoughts, John." Just contemplating how simple it would be to ask you to stay forever. And the easy path isn't always the best one. Indeed, we share a genuine connection. She grinned mischievously. "Don't let your mind wander. I'm not just referring to our time in bed. I genuinely care for you, and I know I could easily fall in love with you. But I'm unsure if it's fair to either of us. My divorce is still fresh, and I fear rushing into something on the rebound. Perhaps it's best if we take things slow and see where they lead. I won't ask you to wait for me to figure things out." "I'd argue with you, but I fear you're right," she conceded. "Though I'm hopeful for us, it's wise to proceed with caution." Later, we rose from bed, used the restroom, showered separately, and shared a quiet breakfast. Despite the temptation to throw caution to the wind and forsake other potential partners, I remained resolute. After tidying up, she escorted me to the door, and we embraced, tears welling in our eyes. "I suppose this is goodbye?" she murmured. "No, I disagree. How about we meet for dinner, say, 2 weeks from this Friday, just to check in?" "All right," she agreed, planting a kiss on my cheek before ushering me out. The click of the door closing felt like the clang of a prison gate, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I might have made a grave error. The rest of the week was plagued by doubt and second-guessing. Come Friday, I decided to join my friends for dinner and drinks. We sat in a secluded booth near the back, with me facing the entrance. As we finished dessert, I spotted her entering with a tall, handsome man. Who was I kidding? He was undoubtedly tall and handsome, I grappled with whether to approach and greet them, but concluded it wouldn't align with our agreement. Witnessing how swiftly she seemed to replace me left me torn. Perhaps I'm a coward, as I waited until she excused herself to the restroom before hastily settling the bill and bidding my friends good night. I resented her for moving on so quickly, and even more so myself. It was a decision we both consented to. One thing was certain: I needed to move forward. Considering myself a decent catch, I had no trouble securing a date for the following Friday night. Her name was Cheryl Thompson, a secretary for one of my clients, with whom I'd shared damageless banter in the past. She knew of my previous marriage, but readily accepted when I clarified my current status as divorced. I always found Cheryl appealing in a professional sense, but I wasn't prepared for the stunning sight that greeted me at her doorstep, and I'm sure my surprise was evident. "I think I've prepared quite well," she remarked. "That's an understatement. Do you look ready to head out?" "Yes, just let me grab my raincoat." I assisted her in donning the cloak, and we embarked on our evening. Dinner proceeded with the customary small talk of a first date, although aside from discussing my divorce, she was taken aback by Jane's actions. Over coffee and dessert, I decided to lay my cards on the table. "Cheryl, I don't want to deceive you. Before my divorce, I became involved with someone, and afterward, we became quite serious. We both felt uneasy about the pace of our relationship and the risks involved in rebuilding, so we agreed to see other people for a while. I don't want you to think I'm just using you as a placeholder. I'm completely open to wherever this might lead." Her laughter had a delightful ring to it. "John, this is only our first date. I don't expect any commitment, but I appreciate your honesty. Let's just take it one step at a time and see where it goes." With that awkwardness behind us, we enjoyed a delightful evening, culminating in a warm kiss on the lips and plans for another date the following Saturday. Meanwhile, I had a dinner engagement with Candide on Friday, and I had no clue how it would unfold. As I held her hands, she looked as beautiful as ever. We chatted casually on our way to the restaurant, but once we placed our orders, she grew serious. "You know, I saw you." I arched an eyebrow. "I was having dinner with friends, and I spotted you. I was going to come over and say hello, but when I returned from the restroom, you were gone." I felt a bit puzzled. "I know we agreed to see other people, but seeing you with another man so soon, well, I suppose I felt a twinge of jealousy. It's silly, I know, but John, you had no reason to be jealous. Stefan is an old friend whom I hadn't seen in ages, and when he called, I decided to take a break and accept his dinner invitation. I'm sorry if it bothered you. No need to apologize. Any turmoil was in my own mind. Actually, it motivated me to get out there and ask someone else out. We had dinner last week." Now it was her turn to raise an eyebrow. "Should I be jealous?" she asked with a smile. "Oh, I don't think so. Although we have another date planned for tomorrow night, we're both on the same page about no commitments. Just two people getting together to enjoy each other's company." "That's sweet," she said with a wistful smile. "You deserve to have a good time." Our conversation was saved from further awkwardness by the arrival of our meals, and we shifted to more pleasant topics. "Would you like to go dancing?" I asked, holding the car door open for her. "No, I think it would be best if you took me home." She drove home in silence, gazing out the window. When we reached her door, we shared a kiss, perhaps with a bit more intensity than intended, and then gently parted ways. "Please stay in touch, John," she said. "I will," I assured her. "Good night, Candide," I said quickly, retreating to my car before any further temptation arose to invite her inside. My date with Cheryl went smoothly, and our goodnight kiss was more passionate, accompanied by some light touching. However, we decided to call it quits before things escalated too far. Despite talking to Candide about once a week, our paths never seemed to cross. I'm not sure if we were unconsciously avoiding each other, or if it was just fate. I saw Cheryl a few more times, and we even ended up in bed together. It was enjoyable, but there was no real spark. After our third night together, Cheryl dropped a bombshell on me. "John, I think this should be the last time." "What? I thought we were doing fine." "Yes, maybe even too well. Your words don't make sense now, John. When we started, we agreed no commitments, and I said I wasn't looking for any commitment. I didn't have any then, and I still don't. But I'm starting to develop feelings for you. And if we continue, I think it could lead somewhere. I'm just not ready for that. I'd rather end it now, before feelings deepen, and it hurts even more later. I hope you understand." "In a strange way, I do. So while it hurts, I'll move past it. I got dressed, kissed her on the forehead, and headed for the door. Good night, Cheryl. Goodbye, John, she said with a sad smile, tears shimmering in her eyes as she closed the door. As I closed the door behind me, I contemplated my next move. That next step involved a string of women, some one-night stands, some short-lived relationships, though none as serious as with Cheryl. Eventually, I realized what was missing from my life and picked up the phone. Hello? She answered. Candide. It's me, John, I said, momentarily forgetting she had caller ID. Candide, I don't know how you're doing, but I'm no longer lost in the wilderness. I've had more rebounds than a pinball machine, and I'm on the upswing. If I still have a chance with you, I want to come home. There was silence on the other end, and I feared I had missed my opportunity. How soon can you get here? Jane didn't end up living a solitary life surrounded by cats or seeking employment in a Mexican brothel. While I wasn't particularly interested in her whereabouts, mutual friends informed me that she was dating, although nothing seemed too serious. Candide expressed interest in inviting Jane to our wedding, though I wasn't sure it was a good idea. I didn't mind, but Jane declined, sending a thoughtful gift instead. I was surprised when Candide struck up a casual friendship with Jane, occasionally meeting for coffee or shopping. It didn't bother me, though it was certainly unconventional. About 6 months into our marriage, I returned home to find Candide dressed to go out. Oh, I thought, here we go again. Luckily, my concerns were unwarranted. Go change. Jane and I are meeting at Amelia's for dinner, she informed me. I know you two have become quite friendly, but don't you think this is a bit much? I questioned. Don't worry, darling. My madness has a method, she assured. Knowing I couldn't argue with her when she had her mind set, I simply shrugged it and went to change. Upon arrival, Jane was already waiting, and the situation felt awkward. Candide and Jane exchanged cheek kisses, a common custom among women, while I stood feeling out of place. None of us seemed to know how to proceed until Jane broke the silence by expressing her pleasure at seeing me and complimenting my appearance. I reciprocated the compliment, and thankfully, we were soon escorted to our table, sparing us further discomfort. Candide briefly conversed with the host, leaving me puzzled upon her return. I asked what was going on, and she reassured me that there was nothing to worry about, though every husband knows that silence from his wife often signals trouble. Nevertheless, I played along, hoping for the best. Candide's plan became clear as she invited Stefan to join us, seating him beside me opposite Jane. While I was relieved that my worst fears were unfounded, the evening still had disaster potential. Thankfully, Jane and Stefan hit it off. Conversation flowed smoothly, and we appeared to be 4 old friends by the end of dinner. Too soon, it was time to leave. Candide and I left as Jane and Stefan opted to continue their evening at the restaurant bar. Although Candide was smug, I couldn't bring myself to be upset. However, it may not last. They clearly hit it off, and I made amends by pampering Candide with a sensual massage and providing her with 3 pleasures before a gentle kiss. We maintained polite but distant relationships with Jane and Stefan, seldom interacting as couples but often in group settings. It seems they have a stable relationship now, and Jane no longer seeks to revive ours. We wish them all the best, and Candide and I couldn't be happier, despite the baby's nightly kicks waking her up.